Shalom, shalom. Davon Mays here with Clouds of Torah. We're dealing with original sin. Did we fall with Adam and Eve? This will be part two in the series. So we're gonna jump right into this. So how could Noah be perfect in his generations if he was affected with original sin? It should have said, since Noah had original sin, he was not perfect like everybody else, and probably shouldn't have been saved from the flood. Genesis 6:9. This is the genealogy of Noah. Noah was a just man, perfect in his generations. Noah walked with God, but he had original sin. It doesn't say that. If Noah's genealogy goes back to Adam, then he should have had this original sin. He couldn't have been just, or some translations say righteous. He couldn't have been perfect in his generations. And if he walked with God, it would have been a flawed walk if he had original sin, which means he could have never really got it together, right? So how was he able to be saved from a flood and save his family? He should have had to wait for Jesus to be born and die, then get saved from the flood. That's not what happened. So, like I said earlier, there's a lot of verses that Christians will point to and say, "Oh, gotcha," right? So we're gonna deal with all of them. Job 5:7. Yet man is born to trouble as the sparks fly upward. Can you be born to some trouble situations? Of course. Exodus 20:5. You will not bow down to them. You will not serve them because I am Yahweh your God, a jealous God, punishing the guilt of the parents on the children of the third and the fourth generations of those hating me. So you could be born in situations where your parents receive some punishment and you get a piece of that. Now, you don't die for your family. Excuse me, you're not going to be put to death for something that your fathers did, but you could be put in a situation, for instance, slavery, like those children who parents sinned and the Israel had to go to Babylon for 70 years. That's a couple of generations that had to, deal with that problem. So you can be born to trouble. Definitely. Does that mean that you just inherit sin though? Like you're just going to be born a bad person, like automatically? No. Jeremiah was trying to keep everybody from sinning before they went to Babylon. He was ordained to be a prophet to the nations. Read Jeremiah chapter 1. If he was born with original sin, he had a lot put on to be he had a lot put on his plate to be a sinner, right? So this is interesting because we know one of the main verses people go to is Psalm 51 on this topic, mostly Christians. A couple of people, mostly I don't want to say Catholic or most of the big denominations, Orthodox Christians. Some of the Messianics will go here too, but a lot of them understand the Tanakh a little bit better than the average Christians. So the Messianics got a little bit more of a Hebraic understanding of things. So the Lord has sought out a man after his own heart. So who could this be? Who would original sin could God be saying he's a man after my own heart? Does that even make any sense? 1 Samuel 13:14. But now your kingdom will not endure. The Lord has sought out a man after his own heart and appointed him ruler of his people because you have not kept the Lord's command. So we know when Saul lost the kingdom, it was given to David. Acts 13:22. So let's go to the New Testament to verify this. Well, we don't need the New Testament's verification, but it says the same thing. And when he had removed him, he raised up for them David as king, to whom also he gave testimony and said, I have found David, son of Jesse, a man after my own heart, who will do all my will. Why was he so confident that David would do his will if he was born with original sin? Psalm 51:5. Behold, I was brought forth in iniquity, and in sin my mother conceived me. See, right there, born in iniquity, right? Brought forth in iniquity, and in sin my mother conceived me. So we're going to go into the full context of this chapter, not cherry pick it, but I was going to, I had to bring it up before somebody said, "Oh, you don't give all the sources for our arguments." And I try to bring everything to the table, show everybody everything, so there's nothing to hide. But this same person who was brought forth in iniquity and in sin, my mother conceived me, we're going to see what that actually means. He's a man after God's own heart, according to the Tanakh and the New Testament. So we have sinners that are after God's own heart. He can't do no good. No matter what he does, it can never be enough. No works could ever be good enough. Now, what merit did David bring to the table? And when he died, David's merit carried on for a long time. How many times did God say, because of David, I'm going to do this, or because of David, I'm going to do that? Because of your father David, Solomon was told, I'm not going to take the kingdom from you. He told Hezekiah, not Hezekiah, Ahaz, right? Like all these kings, they had this merit of David, keeping the kingdom around. God promised David that he was going to keep the kingdom around, and his sons just continued to mess up, but that merit lasted for a long time. How? If David's works meant nothing, according to Paul, how's that possible? If he was staying with original sin, nothing should have ever been good enough. Period. For the Lord had accepted Job. So here's another verse, Job 14:1. Man who is born of woman is of a few days and full of trouble. So Jesus was born of a woman, right? Would that apply to him? See, if you're gonna use these verses to condemn people, then you got to deal with everybody who was born of a woman. Job 42:9. So Eliphaz the Temanite and Bildad the Shuhite and Zophar the Naamathite went and did as the Lord commanded them, for the Lord had accepted Job. How was Job accepted if he had original sin? Job 5:17-20. Behold, happy is the man whom God corrects. Therefore, do not despise the chastening of the Almighty, for he bruises, but he binds up. He wounds, but his hands make whole. He shall deliver you in 6 troubles. Yes, in 7, no evil shall touch you. In famine, he shall redeem you from death, and in war, from the power of the sword. How is this possible? If you have original sin, how can you accept this correction and get delivered in all these things? In Job 5:17, I think it actually goes to verse 27. So it tells you the rest of the things you get saved from. But I mean, being redeemed from death and from the power of the sword, that's pretty big right there. For somebody with original sin, and there's nothing you can do. But for some reason, God accepted Job. We're told Job was perfect. He was upright. He feared God. He turned from evil. Read Job 1:1. And he was rich. So he had blessings all over him. And the Satan actually complained. He said, Job only listened to you because you give him all this stuff. Why did God give Job all that stuff and tell us that he was righteous and perfect and stuff if he had original sin? Shouldn't that have wiped all that out? It should have said all that, but Job was, staying with original sin. Although he's perfect and rich and upright and fear God. It doesn't say that. Although he's born of a woman full of days and full of trouble, he was still able to be perfect and righteous and turn from evil and not sin with his lips. Read the whole book of Job. See what he went through. See that God said there's no one on earth like Job. It says, have you sought after my servant Job, whom there is none like in the whole earth? If Job was different than everybody else, did he skip original sin? Read it. Read Job chapter 2. There's none like him in the whole earth. It should have said, well, he's just like everybody else, born with original sin. How come it don't say that? So what should be taught is we have the capacity to sin. Like Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve were not born into sin because they were not born, but they had the capacity to make mistakes. How Because we have free will. We have the capacity to sin and the capacity to be corrected. We're not doomed. Once we make a mistake, we're not doomed to just be under that mistake forever, unless we choose to ignore correction. Proverbs 3:11, my son, despise not the chastening of the Lord, neither be weary of his correction. Weary of his correction. We just read, behold, happy is the man whom God corrects. Therefore, do not despise the chastening of the Almighty. Do not despise the chastening of the Almighty. Don't turn from that. Accept that correction. Neither be weary of his correction. You can accept the correction. Proverbs 22:15, foolishness is bound in the heart of a child, but the rod of correction shall drive it far from him. Plenty of people know kids who are bad kids, and they grow up and be perfect people. Not perfect, but, good, outstanding people. But they probably had a little rough childhood. We see it all the time. So the rod of correction shall drive it far from him. His parents got him together. A disciplined child can be corrected. Sometimes it takes a little more, but it's possible. They're not doomed with original sin. Because if that's the case, the rod of correction can't drive it from him. That's what it should have said in Proverbs 22:15. Foolishness is bound in the heart of a child, and because he got original sin, you can't do nothing about it. That will be true original sin. There's nothing you can do about it. You inherited sin, and you're just going to be a sinner. Jeremiah 5:3. O Lord, are not thine eyes upon the truth? Thou hast stricken them, but they have not grieved. Thou hast consumed them, but they have refused to receive correction. They have made their faces harder than a rock. They have refused to return. They had a choice. They didn't want to receive correction. People go to jail, don't want to, get their act together. They get out, go right back to the same life. Happens all the time. We call them repeat offenders. Habitual offenders. Job 5:17, behold, happy is the man whom God correcteth. Therefore, despise not thou the chastening of the Almighty. You can receive correction. You're not doomed. It's okay if you made a mistake. You can pick yourself up. A righteous man falls 7 times. You have a choice. You're not doomed with original sin. The child shall know to refuse the evil and choose the good. How can he choose the good if he's doomed to original sin? We are born to sinful parents, just like Cain and Abel had parents that sinned, but Adam and Eve were not born to sinful parents, and they still sinned. The reason is we have free will. Original sin could only make sense if Adam and Eve were born into it. And they didn't have a choice with the tree. But they did have a choice. They had a choice. Isaiah 7:16, for before the child shall know to refuse the evil and choose the good, the land whom you dread will be forsaken by both her kings. The child should have original sin and not be able to choose good. It should say before the child grows up, because he's an original sinner, the land you dread will be forsaken by both her kings. It shouldn't say anything about choosing between good and evil, because he's a sinner. He's going to sin. Why be able to choose if you're going to just be a sinner? What's there to choose from? There's nothing you can do. That's not what it says. Therefore, choose life. Why do we have choices all over the Tanakh if there's nothing you can do with your original sin? Deuteronomy 30:15. See, I have set before you today life and good, death and evil. And what does it say about this? I call heaven and earth as witnesses today against you that I have set before you life and death, blessing and cursing. Therefore, choose life that both you and your descendants may live. How come it doesn't say you're going to die because you can't choose between good and evil? You're going to choose. You're going to be bad. There's no choice. And you and your descendants are going to die in your sins. until I send somebody to save you. It doesn't say that. Therefore, choose life, that both you and your descendants may live. How does that work with original sin? It should have said, there's no hope for you. Today I set before you good, death, and evil, right? Life and good, death and evil, and you're going to die because you're evil. It doesn't say that. Therefore, choose life. Joshua 24:15. And if it seems evil to you to serve the Lord, choose for yourself this day whom you will serve. If it's a bad idea to be a good person, hey, it's on you. Whether the gods of your forefathers, whether the gods which your fathers served that were on the other side of the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell, but as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Why? Because we have a choice. We have a choice. Therefore, choose life. So this will be part 2 in the did we fall with Adam and Eve? Dealing with original sin. So we will see you next time. Shalom, everyone. Have a good night.